Okay, this is the beginning of our first 30, our first page for 30 pages. And I want to just say really quickly that generally I'll work in this format, so in a portrait positioning. However, it is possible I might do a few pages, in a landscape format such as this, but more often than not it's going to be in the more portrait oriented direction. We're going to get that autofocus stuff every time we first start the background because it's solid white, but I don't plan to leave the background solid white for very long. Now I'm going to work through the different types of I'm going to try to give you as many varied types of backgrounds as I can for this class. So, you know, I can't guarantee you're going to get 30 completely different ones, or at least with 30 different ways to create a background, but I'm going to try to give you a lot of really varied ways. And one of my current favorite things to do is to do just a little bit of spray inks and then to flood the rest of the page with just color. So in order to start that, I'm just going to grab some, various different stencils, and I'm not pre-planning anything, so I don't know that, okay, I want to use this stencil because the look of it really works with my focal image, and I it's going to work with my detailing that I want to do. I don't have anything in my mind in advance. I just literally sit down and I start somewhere. Once in a while I might have a focal image and I know I want to use that. Like I'm really big on reusing paintings that I've done on paper, and I do a lot of paintings on paper. I've got stacks and stacks of them, and I like to cut the main focal piece out and glue it down. So oftentimes I might know, gee, I ran across this one and I want to cut this one out and use it. Or once in a while I might have a graphic I want to use, or as is typical with me, I might have a new washi tape that I'm in love with and want to use. So that's about the extent of my pre-planning. And I know that oftentimes when you see my classes, you think that I pre-plan a lot more than I do, but the truth of the matter is it only looks that way because and this I think you're going to find with a lot of teachers, you pre-record. So because you've already recorded it, you can do introductory videos and follow-up videos and promotional videos, and you can make it sort of look as if you had this full and complete plan. Now I do know that there are teachers who do plan out every single thing and they don't stray from that. But I am what I would term an intuitive art journaler. And by that, what I mean is that I really just kind of go with the flow and go with what intuitively feels right to me at that moment. You can't do a whole lot of pre-planning when you are an intuitive art journaler. I'm also very much an intuitive art planner, or art painter. And so like when I'm painting portraits and other paintings, oftentimes I don't know I don't have anything predetermined. I may simply have a photo reference of a face that I really want to paint, or I may have a color palette that I've just really been wanting to create a painting in, but that's about the extent of it. Occasionally I will sit down and do studies and thumbnails, and most often that happens when I'm being commissioned to do a painting. I did a very large 30 by 40 painting that was a commission, and it was a very specific request, and even the color palette had been requested along with the subject matter for the painting itself. This was not a portrait, by the way, and that required several studies before I got right to where I felt the owner of the painting wanted it to ultimately be. And that's rare for me though. And when it comes to art journaling, that's not, I don't pre-plan art journaling. Art journaling is off the cuff. It's very intuitive. So you're going to see a lot of that. So these are just the stencils that I'm currently playing around with. You're going to find that I do that with everything, whether it is a type of supply like the little distress stains, or a color, a certain, color palette, the stencils, everything is with me is kind of like that. Whatever is my current obsession is what, I'm going to work with quite often. Thankfully though, I have a lot of current obsessions, so there's still quite a bit of variety. But these are just the stencils that I currently had out on my desk, and I'm just kind of like putting them down here in a way that looks pleasing to me. I don't have, again, any preconceived ideas about it. So, color-wise, I am only working, for the most part, with 3 colors of ink right now. I'm working with an aqua blue. This, even though it looks, the container's pink, and so the what's in it looks orange, it's actually a nice light yellow, kind of a golden yellow, and then a violet purple that's quite a bit on the pink side. So those are the only spray ink colors that I'm currently working with, and every once in a while I'll throw another color in, but for the most part that's what you're going to see for this class. Now, because I know I'm going to be doing a lot of layering, I can go at this from a couple of different directions. I can start really dark and then know that I need to add lighter colored paints to bring it up. Or I can start really light and keep it light, and then, have the option to put darker and darker colors in. So for this very first page, I'm going to start light, and I'm going to use this kind of golden yellow. And I'm not going to try to cover the entire page. I don't have to spray every place where there's a stencil. I'm just trying to hit some of the areas that I think I'm going to enjoy working with. But it doesn't really matter, because if I don't get enough, I can add more later. If I get too much, I can add white paint or gesso to get rid of it. So if you look at creating your backgrounds and your art journal pages the way I try to teach people to look at computers, a lot of people will say to me, well, I think I know what to do, but I don't want to break it. You can't break your computer, really. You can always reformat and go back to a brand new from the factory. So the same thing kind of goes with your art journal, is you can't ruin it. You can't mess it up, because you can always gesso and start over. Or you can always build up more layers. So don't be afraid to just, let go, just play. Because you can't break it. You can't mess it up. You can't ruin it. You can't do it wrong. And that, for me, I think is probably the reason why a lot of people see my art journal work and think, oh, gee, I want to be able to have that sort of creative freedom that I see that Christy has. All you have to do to have that is to let go, and to be open to being surprised. I actually enjoy when things don't go the way I imagine they're probably going to go, because then I get that element of surprise, and it's kind of like, it's a lot like Christmas morning for a little kid. It's kind of like you get up and you're so excited because you really just don't know what's in all those packages, and you can't wait to find out. That's kind of how I am about my art journaling process. So I'm just going to lift these all back off of here. I kind of talked through a bit so that everything would kind of start to dry. Now this is fun because this heart shaped stencil I've been using with markers a lot, and the last thing I used was red markers, so we got just a hint of red there, which is fun. We could do something with that if we wanted to. I'm going to hit this with my heat gun just a little bit, and I will mute that out so that you can't hear the gun going, because my gun is not a nice quiet one. It's a loud, obnoxious one. It's really an old gun. So I'm going to dry this and come right back. Okay, you're going to notice that I flipped my paper over at one point. I did that so that it would dry from the back a little bit as well. And you can see I'm getting a little warping out of it. I always do when I use my spray inks because I use the acrylic artist inks mixed with water, and there's quite a bit of water in it. They're pretty wet. Different spray inks might not cause as much warping. I don't care if it warps. Most of it will flatten out. Once I put the journal back together and all the pages are sandwiched together, I can just put a heavy book on it for a couple of days, and all the pages will be reasonably flat. So don't be concerned when you see that warping happening. It's not going to affect the final journal. Now, I really haven't determined a complete color scheme yet, but I think I want to play with some browns with the yellow and maybe then a hint of orange and red. So I've got these two different vintage photo and antique linen. Now the antique linen I like to use to fill in lighter areas. So I'm going to start with this one, which is really super dark, this vintage photo. And it will dry a lot lighter than it goes on. And I just really kind of want to fill in some of these little spots. So that's kind of where I'm going to start. This area over here didn't have a lot of spray ink. And I do fill in my edges. I like to doodle in there and in the margins and play around with those, so I don't worry about, I go ahead and just fill them in. Now the one thing that I do want to do is make sure that when I introduce this flood of color that I bring it around everywhere. So I'm going to put some more of it over here. I don't want it to be in just one spot unless I want you to really focus on that spot. Then if I really want to draw your attention to a specific area, then I'll put a color only in that area because it's really going to draw your eye to it. And then over here there's actually quite a lot, so I'm just going to hit along the border of the page. Okay, so that's it. Now the page is just a little bit damp in a couple of spots where the ink was heavy. For the most part though, it's not really wet. So for now the color is staying where I put it. However, these are distress inks. They are water soluble, which means that they will they'll move around a bit when the page gets wet. So I'm actually going to intentionally get it wet along the edges, which hopefully will help to soften it a little bit as well. And you can see the color will move. See how I can just drag it out with my finger everywhere. So I'm actually going to take a wet brush right here, a big fat one, and it's kind of juicy with water. And I'm just going to move some of this color around. So now I'm actually getting a lighter brown and darker brown areas. And I'm getting that just because the distress inks are now wet and they can be moved around. This will also lighten the overall color when it dries a little bit. You can see here I've wiped quite a bit of it off down in this corner, but that's okay. It won't hurt anything. Now the one thing that I do find is that it's kind of difficult to add more distress inks when it's wet like this. So I'm just gonna, oops, and this is coming out kind of green. I must have been using this with something that was blue the last time I used it. Plus, the distress inks do have a tendency to be a little bit on the green side. It must be whatever they use to create them. So I just added these little dots, and I'm going to probably do something with them later if they don't fade out completely. We'll see. Now, since I kind of introduced that green, I think I'm going to add some blue in just for fun. And so I've got I've got 3 different blues. They go all the way from almost a pink purpley blue to a nice blue jean sort of blue to an aqua blue. So I'm going to use all 3, and I'm going to use them by just adding some more of these little dots in. And I'm not paying attention to where, like the first dots were. But sometimes this one's not as juicy as the others. I don't know why. I think because it's older and I've really used a lot of it up. So this is the one that's a little bit more like blue jeans. And I'm just kind of looking for places to fill it in, really. Ooh, nice one there. I really like the way they splatter out like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit these with a little bit more water. And, you know, my paper is very, very saturated with water right now. I could bend it around and cause it to cause, like, you know, little drips or runs. I'm not a fan of those, so I'm not going to do that. But you could, if you were a fan of those, this would be a great opportunity to do that. I'm just soaking up all this excess water that's all over my table here. Now I'm going to just let this sit and dry. It's going to do its own thing. Like here it is running a bit. I'm just going to let it do what it wants to do. And then when it's completely 100% dry, then we'll come back and we'll start with our focal portion of the page. So this is it for your background today. I don't know how long this took, maybe 5-10 minutes, but this is a good start. Now one thing that I do want to do though, actually with my background before I stop, even though I know I just said I was going to stop, didn't I? Is I want to add a little bit more of the spray ink back in, because I went really light with it the first time, but I really do want more yellow. So I'm actually going to just kind of toss the stencils back down onto the page, just very lightly though, because I don't really want them to interfere too much with what's happening in the background. So I'm just going to toss them down here. I'm just going to use those 3, and I'm going to go back to my yellow ink, and I'm just going to add some more yellow back in. And I'm kind of concentrating on that corner at the center here, and then inside this heart for the most part. So I kind of just put the yellow back in around here. And I'm going to go ahead and lift the stencils back off of it. And everything is going to just move around and blend. You can see how the stencil pulled the blues in on the stencil design. If I left it on there, it would probably dry that way, which would be kind of fun. But I'm using acrylic inks, and I don't really want my stencils to be glued to my paper, so that's why I went ahead and lifted them off of there. And I'm actually just kind of drying them off. I think this one's got some nice design. There's a lot of yellow ink on it, so I'm actually just going to lay it down on here real quick. Dry these others off a bit, get them out of the way. And then I think I'm going to use my brayer and just encourage this to actually touch down on the paper. And then I'm just going to lift it off. There we go. So we got a little bit of pattern going now here, which is nice because this area kind of looked a little empty. So I'm going to let all this dry and do its thing, and then I'll come back with tomorrow with the second part of this page.